years old, is down here at the east gate. She drew this, and you can see her down in the little, this was a little wooden 3-foot by 3-foot. Here she is, and she sees this big, huge thing. She compared it to a full moon come up. Here's the control tower. Here's the British Foley House. And 6 miles out here, this is the lighthouse. Thank you. I'm glad you're getting this. This is not this direction. And Lori is an artist by both love and now is becoming a professional illustrator. And she did this drawing to give me kind of an overview of the landscape. And she also drew a close-up of this red, orange, fiery light. And that you're going to hear her describe it in her own words as handfuls of colored fire.
If you took 3 handfuls of colored fire and put them together, and you saw one color, then you saw another color, then you saw another color, you get this feeling that it's not blinking, but that it's turning. And then this was in front of me on the other side of the runway in the woods. There's nothing but darkness from the trees. And it just slowly disappeared.
It went down from high on an angle into the trees.
Right. Just straight down into the horizon where the dark trees were. You could tell it was big, even though it's like looking at the moon. Is the moon big? You knew it was big because you could see it. You know, you knew it was off at a distance, and you're thinking, it's just like nothing else you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. You can't even compare it to something because there's nothing to compare it to.
Lori, what was the first thing that you did after seeing this bright orange light disappear into the forest?
I remember watching it, and then I remember the metal phone inside of that little wooden guard shack. You have to open up the metal lid on the wall. And I remember lifting it up and calling the desk sergeant saying, some big ball of fire or whatever. Somebody's got to come down to the east gate. I don't want to be down here by myself. I just saw this huge ball of light just disappear into the forest. And then next thing I remember is Trementozzi being there. He would have been police 5. He came to my gate, and I remember we sat there listening to the radio, which is Motorola, as Bonnie, Lieutenant Tamplin, Bonnie Tamplin, talking to Sergeant Robert Ball, and I just remember the fear in her voice and her saying, Bob, where are you? I can't see anything. And she was scared to death, and she was just, Bob, where are you? I can't see anything. And she was so scared, and this was our lieutenant. And rumors that it was just a Orford lighthouse, which was ridiculous. Like I said, I lived in Orford at the time. And then they said it was Mars. What, do they think we're stupid? You know, obviously it was to shut us up and to cover it all up.
So Lori's sighting was north of the base, not east toward the Orford Lighthouse. Other people also saw different lights that night, including John Trementozzi and Police 5, law enforcement, along with 4 other men. Those 5 men watched colored lights in the sky and argued about whether the British were celebrating New Year's Eve early. Here is John Trementozzi.
We were doing security checks on the flight line, and we noticed lights in the sky.
And what colors were you seeing in the sky, and what patterns?
The lights were red, green, and white. We notified the control tower. And what we seen was the lights were not blinking. There were just 3 steady lights. And they'd be in one spot, and then it would disappear, go to another spot, appear again, go to another spot, appear. And it wouldn't be any certain pattern that it would show up in. And no noise, and it wasn't stars. Mm-hmm. The white light wasn't flashing like it was a plane, and it was very weird. It was very weird. Matter of fact, we watched that probably for a good hour and a half.
So from somewhere around 2 to 3:30 a.m.?
Right. It was after Christmas, and one of the things we were wondering while we were watching this is England had a different New Year's than the Americans because it was right around that time, which we ruled out after because it was just too strange.
Do you know any of the men who were with you that night that Colonel Holt was called?
I know the woman at the gate check was Lori Bowen. We notified our desk sergeant, who in turn notifies the sergeant on duty, the shift leader. And then security came out. The colonels were notified, Colonel Holt.
Meanwhile, after midnight on December 27, 1980, John Burroughs woke up agitated, thinking about what he and Jim Peniston encountered in the forest, and felt that the lights were back. Even though he was off duty, John went to Bentwater's Desk Sergeant O'Brien to ask what was happening and learned that D-Flight Shift Commander Lieutenant Bonnie Tamplin had been relieved of her duty because a light entered her vehicle in the forest, causing Lieutenant Tamplin to panic and cry during her radio communications. The assumption is that Lieutenant Tamplin had gone into Rendlesham Forest with D-Flight Master Sergeant Robert Ball to investigate Lori Bowen's fiery sphere report. According to John Burroughs, even though his C flight was off duty December 27 to 28, when D flight was scheduled second midnight shift at 11, John Burroughs was there too. Filling in a few more facts from what he saw at the guard mount and his position at the East Gate that night is former Airman First Class Doc Rhodes. Doc and John Burroughs went through basic training together at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, and they were good friends by December of 1980. Doc was surprised to see John Burroughs from Charlie Flight, along with several other C Flight people, show up at what should have been only a D Flight guard mount at 11 p.m. on December 27th. Doc went to Burroughs to ask what was going on. John told Doc he would explain more later about what happened to him, Peniston, and Ed Kovansak in the forest, but now John wanted to ride with Doc Rhodes in a patrol car to the East Gate because he wanted to get back into Rendlesham Forest.
And I got my patrol vehicle, and Burroughs rode along on patrol with me. That's when he explained to me about what they had seen. They seen a craft landing over in the Rendlesham forest area, and they went out to investigate it, and there was something there that they couldn't understand what it was, and I think somebody touched it.
Jim Peniston touched it.
Okay. And then it moved away from them or something. You know, it was definitely something out there. And then I guess it was right around midnight, my flight chief, Sergeant Whitehead, called me and told me to proceed out to Woodbridge CSC. I think I left Burroughs at Woodbridge CSC because they were all getting their gear and stuff together to go out into the forest. I remember going out to the gate, and I was by myself, and in just a little bit, all of the trucks and vehicles came through. There were six-pack, which is six-passenger pickups with four-wheel drive, and a couple of three-pack police vehicles, pickup trucks, you know.
Were there any trucks that had light-alls in them that passed in front of you at the East Gate?
Oh, yeah. I think there were 2 or 3 pickups towing light-alls out to that site. Everything that they took, they come right past me with it.
And what did you think about seeing light-alls going out into the forest?
Well, I knew it had to be something going on because I had seen a lot of things floating around over there even before this incident even happened. So that was one of the reasons why I didn't go out there with them, because I was pretty sure that there was something out there. So I just decided I would sit there at the East Gate and see what was going on.
What did you hear on your radio?
Well, the main thing I can remember mostly was Burroughs kept saying, "Did you see it? Did you see it?" I remember that real well. And then I think Colonel Holt or somebody tried to get him to hush up, which they did, you know. This went on for a pretty good while. Then eventually the light-all units went out, and the radios were just almost useless, you know. And then I've seen 2, 3, maybe 4 objects that look like big Roman candles that you shoot into the air, you know, the fireworks. But these looked bigger, and they were reddish, bluish in color, you know, real pretty in color. They came up over the tree line and hesitated for a little bit, and then they just zoomed off into kind of like a northeast direction.
Then you knew they were not Roman candles.
Right, right. Burroughs talked to me after the shift was over.
What did he say?
That it left a tripod impression in the ground, and it split up into pieces, and those pieces moved around through the woods and everything, and I think they got a little disoriented while they were out there.
Now here is Sergeant Peniston's description of the craft that he says that he touched.
It was a triangular craft. The fabric of the craft was black like glass, and then throughout the fabric of the craft there was some coloring varying from saucer shape to pie-shaped circles that moved around the craft. Some were red, blue, some yellow, or orange, I guess more orange. John is still with me, and I started taking observations in the notebook to coordinate the time I was there and what my actions were.
You are seeing what look like changing geometric patterns below the glass or above the glass?
Predominantly below the glass on the underside of the craft, and then occasionally moving around the upper side. It appeared that the coloring was part of the actual craft fabric. It made no sense. I've never seen anything that had that type of effect before.
Can you see through the black glass into the interior?
No, it was fully opaque. As we approached it, though, that's when I stepped off measurements of the craft. It measured approximately 9 feet long. That's 3 long steps with my stride, and approximately 6.5 feet tall. Occasionally, you would get some movement of color throughout the fabric of the craft. Sometimes a small glob that was probably 6 inches across, sometimes 12 inches across, but they were very sporadic color.
Circles that would change their size from something like 6 inches to maybe 12 inches when they moved over the surface of this dark black glass?
That is correct. It's hard to describe, but I think what stands out in my memory is the blackness of the craft. If you took an onyx stone and you had an onyx stone that measured 9 feet long and 6 feet high, that's what you would see.
Wow.
Yeah, to say the least. It was very unusual.
Were you thinking at that moment, this is not from Earth?
I knew that it was not from any form of government. I mean, no Air Force on Earth. It was beyond our capability.
Did you say to John Burroughs then, this looks like something from outer space?
I looked at John and I said, I don't know how in the hell we're going to explain this.
And do you remember what he said?
John says, we have a UFO here. I says, we have something here. I said, I got to have quiet here. I had already paced it off. This is my second or third time I was walking around it, mainly in awe. Toward one side of the craft, there was markings on the craft, which were very unusual, probably 2.5, 3 feet wide. I was looking for a crew compartment or a window or something. I touched it, and the air temperature out there at the time was probably, I don't know, 34 degrees, something like that. Mm-hmm. It was very warm to the touch.
And you were feeling heat and what else?
Smoothness of the craft feels like glass, but it can't be glass. It's got to be metal, but it felt like glass. I was confused at that point because nothing in my training prepared me for what was going on. As I felt my way around the craft, I came upon the symbols that were on the craft and gave them a lot more attention, feeling each one, and then recording them in my notebook. If you had a sheet of smooth glass and you took a piece of sandpaper and you laid it on that glass, running from the glass to the sandpaper, that's how it felt.
Did you have anything come into your mind in terms of thought or image?
Well, did I feel an intelligence? Yes. But here's something that is odd. I lost track of John for like 45 minutes or so. I don't know where he was at. There was like a 45-minute gap of time there, which seemed like
I don't know, a couple minutes. I don't know what caused the distortion.